Hello and welcome to a special episode of 10 Lessons Learned. During this program, we will try out a new format and dive into our archives of more than 100 episodes and more than 1,000 lessons learned from our distinguished guests. We want to focus on specific big themes and wisdoms that have been shared by our guests. My name is Siebe van der Zee, and I'm joined by my colleague Yi Wang, and today we are delving into the topic of embracing uncertainty. We hope you will enjoy this new short segment. There is still a lot of untapped value from our ever-growing library of 10 lessons learned. Let us know what you think. All right, here we go. Embracing uncertainty. We all know that anxious feeling. Think about getting ready for a job interview or preparing yourself for a presentation to a large audience. What about handing over your resignation letter to your boss? Or perhaps signing over your house as collateral to fund a startup. These are all tough situations to be in. And they're not just feelings. They can actually trigger a visible physiological response in us. For example, sweaty palms, shaky hands, a pounding heartbeat, and a trembling voice. As a result, feeling doubtful, uncertain, and perhaps feeling a little scared may actually happen. We've all been there, right?
Absolutely, see, but you're describing me at the moment, appearing on the podcast with you for the first time. It's great talking to you on this occasion. When it comes to uncertainty, absolutely, I agree with you. We face this all the time in our lives. We see it at the macro level, we see it in the community, we see it at an individual level as well. It can feel big and feel small at times, but uncertainty feels like such abstract concept. Our guest, Harvard professor and the mother of mindfulness, Dr. Ellen Langer, told us that certainty is just a mindless illusion.
Everything is always changing. Everything looks different from different perspectives. Yet schools, podcasts, newspapers, magazines always give us information as if it's absolute. And what happens is when you hold the world still, when it's actually in flux, you end up with less control than you otherwise would have, even though the whole thing is designed in part to give you control. Uncertainty is a fact of life. If you embrace uncertainty and exploit the power of uncertainty, you're going to be much more successful in all of your ventures. So when you're taught something, so for example, I was taught horses don't eat meat. Now, and it's just a fact, you accept it. But it turns out I was at this horse event. This man asked me, when I watch his horse, well, he goes and gets his horse a hot dog. Well, Harvard, Yale, all the way through. I'm thinking, this is ridiculous. He brought back the hot dog and the horse ate it. And at that moment, I realized that everything I thought I knew could be wrong.
As was articulated by the legendary psychologists and life coach Katie and Gay Hendricks in what they called one central problem in life is the upper limit problem.
The upper limit problem is the one problem because wherever you find yourself getting stuck, you will find that that very thing, if you open to it correctly, is an invitation to your genius. So for example, if I get stuck on some problem we're having between me and Katie, the moment I can, become transparent about it and communicate about it in a way that takes 100% responsibility for it, suddenly this flow awakens. And I've seen it in boardrooms and I've seen it 1,000 times in the office here, that people overcome whatever upper limit they are and they move immediately into that beautiful flow state that I'm calling genius. And so the direct effect of overcoming an upper limit problem is that it gives you a direct door into the creative essence of yourself and the universe.
I feel that what they alluded to is that us humans very much hardwired to prefer stability. Changes brings a natural fear in us, because we really don't know what's going to happen, what's going to come. We lose a sense of control, even though that sense of control can be a false sense of control. Yeah, so as a starting point, I think what our guest told us is to be conscious about this natural cognitive limitation in us before we start dealing with the situation, is to recognize it.
So Perhaps the best way to deal with uncertainty is being counterintuitive. Trying to control anxiety can easily lead to more anxiety. We, people, suffer in vain because pressure, stress, and other mental challenges are typically unplanned and unexpected. They are external and they typically cannot be controlled or influenced by us human beings. One of our guests, Professor Bas Boersma, a well-known urban innovator and former chief digital officer with the city of Rotterdam, he told us in one of his lessons, learn to be comfortable. He talked about the fact that we're living in an age where we see a major paradigm shift happening. The world around us is changing. The scale and pace of change is much greater than 20 or 30 years ago. That's happening now, and we're all part of it. One way or another, we have to learn to become more comfortable with uncertainty and changing situations.
I think currently, Siba, we're living in an age where we see a major paradigm shift happen. The world around us is changing much more than, say, in the early 90s when I served in Cambodia. We're getting digitalized and things around us become more networked. The old industrial age paradigm is going out of the window. And you know what, Siba? There is another kind of side lesson to that, but it doesn't come from me, but I digested it and I can reproduce it, which is this. When you're living a major shift, like an industrial revolution type of shift, the past stops being a source of guidance for the present and future, which means that all the things that you could hold on to as in terms of certainties, things that were relevant to you, that were taught to you, may not be as relevant to guide you through the present and future. And with that comes a level of discomfort. And this is something that all of us, young and old, we need to grow comfortable with. We need to grow. We need to learn to be comfortable with being uncomfortable.
From a different perspective, we just don't know what will happen next, most of the time. Jim Carroll, a big name, big figure in the Australian media industry, told us in his lesson that our career path may not be what you think. There's a lot of serendipity, a lot of luck involved. So we have to keep an open mind.
Absolutely. I totally agree with Jim and Bas there on their lessons learned. I think getting a little more comfortable with the situation is a fantastic way to look at it. The problem's not going away, obviously, but, it's really important that we hone a figure it out mindset. This is the lesson shared with us from Conrad Taylor, one of your guests, Siba, a military and business veteran in his own right, and definitely he has gone through quite a lot in his own career. What he said really was that things will eventually pass one way or another. We need to keep trying. We need to believe in that, we'll figure out something eventually. The solution may not be clear at the time, but there will be one, right? That's the key point.
I agree with Conrad. Once we are ready to face up to the challenges ahead of us, we can actually start dealing with the situation at hand. We can never avoid the concept of resilience. Another guest, Beng Yo, reminded us not to be afraid of making mistakes. It's necessary for growth. There's so much truth in that. Again, it may be hard to see when we are in the middle of dealing with stress, pressure, and yes, uncertainty. But as people advance in their careers and in their lives, it's important to extract personal growth opportunities from each of those challenges. And yes, that typically becomes so much more obvious in hindsight. Or taking it to another level, in the words of our colleague, co-host, and dear friend, Jeffrey Wang, let's be proactive and apply his lesson, run towards the fire.
The fact that we need to run towards conflict, because that anything that's worth anything in life is worth the conflict. And the other thing I've learned throughout my years is that when we push conflict further down the road, it will only make it worse. Now, This was a very, very hard lesson for me to learn, because I grew up in a culture that is a very passive culture, is a very conflict avoiding culture. In Asia, people don't say what they mean because that's what they're taught, because that's the way you avoid conflict in order to be able to live with each other. And yes, there is a cultural element of this, but as I learned in the Western culture to run towards the conflict, I've realized that this is a much better way to live, because what you get to is an understanding of each other that you would not otherwise have if you were just to avoid conflict.
Running towards the fire, that's classic Jeff, isn't it, Siba? It's definitely not easy to do. I suppose a gentler way to put it from a different guest of ours, David Chalky, is that he recommends us to be our own disruptor. This is to actively seek out opportunities and challenges to grow. So in Jeff's analogy, we really need to have some protective gear and fire extinguishers and whatnot before we start running towards the fire. And metaphorically, these protective gear and the equipment that we've got are super important mindsets. Like you mentioned, the mindset of resilience, the mindset of having a can-do attitude, growth mindset, and also, really importantly, a very healthy dose of self-belief as well. So thanks, Siba. I really enjoyed this short conversation with you today. And in this new format, I hope our audience likes it. The upshot of this topic, that is embracing uncertainty, is that being scared is a natural feeling that we all have. When it happens, it really just means that we're about to grow. We're about to enter this growth phase. So frequent discomfort is really the price of accelerated growth, and we should embrace it. So on the topic of embracing uncertainty, these are the lessons learned that we drawn out from the library. There's obviously so much more than these lessons, but here we are. I really hope you like it.
Well, thank you, Yi. It's great to talk to you. And to our audience, you've been listening to a special episode of 10 Lessons Learned. The mission of 10 Lessons Learned is to focus on wisdom and permanent knowledge. It's not so much about current affairs, the stock market, or politics, no matter how relevant these issues are or may be. Our goal is to capture the lessons from our guests and share them as far and wide as possible. I hope you enjoyed the show. We will include the guest names and the links to their lessons in the show notes. Please don't forget to leave us a review or a comment. You can also email us at podcast@10lessonslearned.com. That is podcast at number 10, lessonslearned.com. I hope you will subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. And remember, this is a podcast that makes the world wiser and wiser, lesson by lesson. Thank you, and stay safe.